Norway is a country that's known for its beautiful mountains, deep valleys, and well-planned cities. Norway is a country that's renowned for having some of the best standards of living and is known for being one of the richest countries in the world. But to many strangers who look from the outside, the success that Norway has experienced should be seemingly impossible. With the difficult terrain and inhospitable cold, it's amazing how Norway has beat the odds and reached where it has. What is the secret to Norway's success, and what have they done to reach this level of economic success? Let's find out. Norway, as the name suggests, is a Nordic country that is located toward the upper latitudes of the planet. The country neighbors superpowers like Russia and the UK, but plays a crucial role on a global level. Norway is a relatively small country with about 390,000 square kilometers of land that is spread across mountainous terrain and deep valleys. Norway has a population of about 5 million people throughout the entire state, making it one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. Norway is known for being one of the coldest places on the planet, with the top half of the country being above the Arctic Circle. The region experiences some of the most bone-chilling colds you could think of. Norway, in addition to this, has only very little land that is considered to be arable, that is, ready to be farmed on. Norway's history shows that the settlers who reached Norway settled around these arable lands, which were usually located below the mountains in the deep valleys which had channels from the oceans called fjords. Fjords are bodies of water that begin from the ocean and usually lead deep inland. How did a country then that had its own population separated by mountains and challenged with hostile land end up becoming this wildly successful? The very same geography that seemed like a curse to the Norwegians was actually going to be their golden ticket to the top. The fjords that we talked about earlier were the Norwegians' gateway to success. Norway's enormous coastline was a great boon for the nation, as they were able to use these channels as international ports. One of Norway's greatest exports at the time was their lumber. Because of the way in which the country is positioned, cut lumber was easily transported to the coasts, where it could be portioned and straight away loaded onto ships to be taken across the world. Norway, very early on, understood that as a country, if they wanted to succeed, trust between one another was going to be very important. The settlements between each fjords used to fix each other's ships and build new ships together for their common benefit. This cooperative culture seeped into every facet of their country's economies. Every industry, from fishing to their country's banking, was propelled by this cooperative nature. By the time the 1900s rolled around, Norway had one of the most financially stable economies in the world, with its GDP exceeding far from any of its European counterparts. Norway's first economic boom would come by way of their hydroelectricity. Norway had been blessed with many rivers. The government, seeing the incentive, capitalized on this by allowing foreign companies to invest in their nation. However, the government had the foresight to ensure that the country did not fall into the hands of private investors. Any hydroelectric company that wanted to start up a station in the country had to hand over a certain percentage of their profits to the government and unconditionally surrender their machinery and stations after 60 to 80 years. Foreign investors saw these deals as fair as they made their money back in that time and heavily invested in the country. As a result, Norway had more electricity than it knew what to do with. The next enormous economic boom that the country would receive would be when they discovered oil reserves off their coasts. The chances of discovering oil in this region were considered next to zero. But when the Netherlands discovered the Groningen oil reserves in 1959, it prompted the American oil company Phillips to acquire a license from the Norwegian state to dig for oil reserves. And sure enough, they would strike oil in 1967 in a field called Balder. But this oil was considered to be not very economically viable at the time. But in 1969, Phillips Petroleum would strike the lottery. They discovered an oil field that is one of the largest offshore reserves in the world, Ekofisk. Ekofisk would just be the beginning, as they would discover more natural gas reserves and oil fields up north. Norway would take a lesson out of their own books from the hydroelectricity and lumber eras and apply the same to the oil and gas fields production, making all foreign investments to give them a stake in the company and handing over the facilities after a certain number of years. The country would then establish its state-owned oil company called Statoil, which is now known as Equinor. Norway is now a petrostate with more than 20% of its economy being compromised by the oil industry. But unlike every other petrostate in the world, Norway is one of the most democratic and transparent countries in the entire world and has diversified its economy away from oil. Norway has suffered an economic slump only thrice, and only one of those 3 times was due to their own mistakes. The first was in the 1980s, when Norway was a proper petrostate with no other backing industry to support it. When the price of oil collapsed during the oil recession, the economy went along with it. But as the economy climbed back up, the government of Norway understood that the country needed to diversify its economy or stay chained to the unpredictable rise and fall in the rates of oil. It is in response to this that Norway came up with one of the most ingenious ideas ever, the Pension Global Fund, or the Oil Fund. The Oil Fund consists of the excess profits made by the state-owned oil company Equinor and the taxes paid by other oil companies in the nation. This fund, although started in 1990, has grown to an estimated $1.5 trillion in value. This communal pool of money is the largest in the world, and if it were to be cashed out, each Norwegian citizen would get about $250,000 each. How amazing! But this sort of fund would only work in a nation such as Norway, due to the culture of trust they have fostered among their people from the early ages of the country. To truly understand how well planned the fund is, you have to look at the terms and conditions that were written when it was formed. The money that was received was to be diversified into the stock market and real estate, and a cap of 3% was placed on the amount of money that could be drawn from the fund per year. And if you think that is a small amount, you'd be wrong. 3% of the oil fund currently could easily provide for more than 20% of the country's budget annually. That's how big this fund is. The oil fund is also the biggest investor on the stock market, owning 1.5% of all shares in the world. This makes the Norwegian people, a mere 0.07% of the world, the largest stock market owners in the world. The country has found ways even to cut down its own consumption of oil and make itself rely more on its amazing hydro energy by incentivizing electric vehicles over gas-powered ones, producing an outlet for the excessive energy created by Norway's water, wind, and geothermal stations. Although Norway started out in a difficult position due to its remoteness and challenging terrain, due to its trust culture, timely investments, and foresight, the country was able to come up from a simple fishing community to a global superpower that's on its way to becoming the richest country in the world. The country is a shining example in the geopolitical world as to how a country and its people ought to work with each other to ensure a brighter day today and an even brighter future tomorrow. If you have enjoyed this video and understood how Norway is working its way to becoming the richest country in the world, Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.